The following is a special presentation from WGEM.
My name's Kate Doherty, and I'm the president and founder of a nonprofit here in the tri-state area called Downcountry. I'm also a proud wife, and I am a mom of 3 amazing children, one of whom happens to rock an extra chromosome.
So Elliot is the absolute joy of our family's life. When he meets people, he meets them and loves them exactly the way they are.
And I'm passionate about children and adults who learn and live life differently, and about helping them fully actualize their lives right here in the tri-state area. When Elliot was born, he actually popped out with an APGAR of 9.5. I had a C-section after like 16 and a half hours of labor or something like that. And anyway, we thought everything was great. And then for the first few hours, and then about 11 a.m., he started turning blue. My husband was down there, and there was a beautiful doctor by the name of Dr. Giardini, and Dr. J is what we called him. And he came in, and Tony said, you know, what's going on? He said, well, you know, your son has a hole in his heart, and it's called AV canal, and we're going to fix it. And he said, I think he probably has Down syndrome as well. And Tony said, well, you know, Down syndrome, you know, what is that? What's that mean? And the doctor said, what it means is I'm gonna fix that hole in his heart. You're gonna have a beautiful, happy, healthy baby boy. You're gonna take him home and love him. And if you can't do that, then I'm gonna do that. But for us, it was always not that Down syndrome never had Elliot. Elliot has Down syndrome. And it's part of who he was. Not because I don't recognize what they are, or because I don't recognize the challenges that go along with potentially learning and living life differently, but because I guess I grew up always believing let's build on the strengths. I was lucky enough growing up to have neighbors who their son was the very first a child brought out of a hospital ICU setting into a home ICU setting. Clint Leeser was his name. He was a beautiful little boy who was never able to take a breath on his own. But to me, he was just Clint. He was just this beautiful little boy with this gorgeous smile and these beautiful eyes, and we would all do our best to help take care of Clint and to play with him. And so I was lucky growing up here in the tri-states that I had a very early exposure to individuals who learn and live life differently. And when you're exposed as a child, you don't see people differently. So to me, it was just Clint. When Elliot was about 6 months old, I had him in my arms, and we were in one of the courthouses picking up some regular stuff. And I had a lady come up to me, and who I knew, and she said, oh, is that your baby? And I said, yes, you know, yes, this is my baby. And she said, oh, he has Down syndrome. And I said, yes, he does have Down syndrome. And she said, well, do you think he'll be able to live in a group home, or do you think you'll have to institutionalize him? And I remember taking a breath and thinking, and I just looked at her and I smiled, and I said, actually, I was thinking about college. At that moment, I remember feeling like my world tilted on its axis, because we hadn't discussed Down syndrome, we hadn't brought it up, because it really was just, it was largely irrelevant to the way we saw the world at that point in time. But then once we realized that there were people who were scared of individuals with disabilities, we made a commitment. We actually went and spoke with our church and said, we're going to go to this national conference and we're going to learn about Down syndrome. and we're gonna come back to this area and we're gonna help teach people about Down syndrome, what it is, and all the possibilities. Because see, I knew that individuals with Down syndrome could get married. I knew individuals with Down syndrome could hold jobs, that they could have meaningful relationships. We knew all of these things. Unfortunately, it wasn't the common image that when you say Down syndrome, people had flashing through their heads. I think young children, when they're exposed to people of all different walks of life and individuals with disabilities, they're accepting. They just morph. They work with it. That's just actually one of my favorite stories for when Elliot was in preschool is one of the little boys came out and said, "Mom, Elliot knows sign language. How cool is that? And he can recognize sight words because he knows sign language." Well, now Elliot couldn't talk very well at all when he was 3 years old, but this little boy in his class thought it was the coolest thing because he knew sign language. However, with what you find, unfortunately, if you have grown-ups who've never been exposed and who haven't been around, I think there's a fear of the unknown. Unfortunately, I think there's still that stigma around that somehow you may catch, whatever it is, or you're gonna pick that up or somehow, and that's really erroneous. For grown-ups, it can be something as simple as thinking, oh, the child can't take piano, or I wouldn't know how to possibly teach a child, to play piano, or I wouldn't possibly know how to teach a child with a disability to swim, or I wouldn't know how to. Well, here's the deal. Those parents that have this beautiful child, they don't know. No child comes with an instruction manual. And so you learn, and all it takes is willing heart and helping hands. That's truly what it takes. And the other piece that I think comes into play here, that sometimes breaks my heart a little bit, is people say things like, oh, well, you don't know what they're gonna be like when they grow up. Well, no, you're right. No child born do we know what they're gonna be like. None of us know. I think you have an illusion you're going to have a perfect child, but there is no such thing on this planet. They're perfect because we love them. And so our job is to help and help them learn and grow.
And the 5 goals that were in our heart that we would have had for any child, typical or one rocking an extra chromosome, that he have friends, that he have a relationship with God, that he have and find the love of his life at some point, that he be employable, and that he live independently. Those goals, Tony and I decided early on, those were the goals that we were going to guide, that those were going to be our North Star. I have a little boy, when I look at those 5 goals that we had for him, he has friends, he has real relationships with people, he is independent, and sometimes independence is a hard thing when you have a 12, 13-year-old young man to work with, but it is vitally important. He loves his God. Because we did these things, the world is so much more open to him. And it doesn't mean that he's a quote-unquote rock star, or that somehow that extra chromosome didn't affect him the way it affects others. It simply means that from the very beginning, there was a North Star guiding us with those 5 goals. And I believe that that's made a lot of difference in his life. And I believe it's made a huge difference in the lives of others. And I hope and I pray that if Down Country has done nothing else, it has opened others' eyes to the possibilities that those 5 goals for individuals who live and learn life differently, irregardless of what their abilities are or are not, those things are possible right here in the Tri-States. So Elliot is the absolute joy of our family's life. According to me, I wish the world had a lot more Elliots.
Talking about how Down Country founded, And a lot of people think that you need to be some form of an expert to, work or deal with children or adults with disabilities. Well, I assure you, the Board of Downcountry most certainly was not a board of experts on how children and adults with disabilities learn. We were farmers, we were lawyers, we were teachers, we were stay-at-home moms, just a bunch of friends and neighbors who all believed in children. I'm trying to accomplish a culture shift. I'm trying to accomplish a culture shift right here in the Tri-States. I want desperately for individuals who learn and live life outside the box to be viewed and accepted as the beautiful, amazing people that they are. I hope that we can create a universal dialogue by which we're helping each child, each adult get what they need to be the best version of themselves.
So it was in 2011, yes, that we journeyed to San Antonio, Texas. We had been cyber stalking the National Down Syndrome Congress at that point in time for all their education, medical, technology-related information on things like therapy, and so we could get the latest and greatest, up-to-date, most recent, what best practice was for what we should be doing with Elliot. But we hadn't wanted to go to the convention, quite frankly. Again, that whole fear factor, because we didn't know what were those kind of people like. And hearing myself say that now, I too evidently had some of that ingrained stigma because I didn't want to join a club. I just wanted to be the mom club. Well, now I'm here to tell you that club and that decision was the most beautiful decision I've ever made in my life and the best decision we've ever made for our family. Upon arriving in San Antonio, met a lovely lady by the name of Diane Maxwell who said, "You must meet Nancy Gianni." And Nancy Gianni is the founder of Gigi's Playhouses. Gigi's Playhouses are Down Syndrome Achievement Centers that provide programming and support with people for Down syndrome and their family. Nancy has several children. When Gigi was born, they were celebrating in the birthing room. And the way she describes it is the nurses came in and they shut the blinds and they made it very dark. And they came in and they said, "Your daughter, Gigi, has Down syndrome." She took Gigi home and she very quickly realized that this beautiful baby who everybody, all they wanted to talk about was a diagnosis of Down syndrome, was simply a baby like all of her other children. And so she made a decision that she was going to go to a support group. The way she describes it is she walked in, and it was dirty floors and cracked linoleum and, posters tearing down, which we do have a tendency to do this. If you haven't been to anything within the disability community, if it's from an institutionalized setting, we try to make things as ugly as possible. And so the way she described it, if you weren't depressed when you walked into that room, you were going to be depressed when you walked out of that room. And so she came home from that meeting and she made a promise to her daughter that she was going to do something about it, that was not the way things were going to go from that point on. On Gigi's first birthday, Nancy opened the very first Gigi's Playhouse, which provides free programming, services, therapy, and presents individuals with Down syndrome in the beautiful light they deserve to be as whole people. And as she was finishing telling her story, she said and looked out at the audience, and I swear she looked directly at me and my husband and said, "What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it to help the world see individuals with Down syndrome in a different way?" And so Downcountry was our response to Nancy Gianni's challenge that day. What are you going to do about it? And our answer was to create Downcountry, which provides scholarships so that our people here in the Tri-States can go to national and international conferences,
hopefully with Downcountry, what we're beginning to do here in the Tri-States is we're creating this family of people who are community members, they're kids in school, they're teachers, they're therapists, they're you, they're me, they're farmers, who simply are making a commitment to want to learn more so that we can do better. So our next generation will grow up and maybe we can make things better for all our people. And I think we're seeing movement here. It's never enough, but I think we're beginning to see some movement here. One of the things that happens when we talk about Down syndrome or abilities or disabilities is people have a tendency to think that doesn't apply to me. That's those people over there. And the reality is it's all of us together. And when we all work together to provide accessibility for individuals who learn and live life differently, we all become better. You become better and I become better. And I'll tell you a story. So we had a self-advocate speaker come in one year for Rhinestones and Rodeo. And his name is Lee Jones, and he has Down syndrome. And he's a personal trainer, and he lived independently in an apartment in Kansas City, and he could drive. And so I went to pick up some stuff at that time at Best Buy in Quincy, Illinois. And Lee went to the store with me. And I was standing in line waiting to check out, you know, kind of in a rush. And Lee gently, very kindly took me by my shoulders and turned me this way. And he said, "Miss Kate, you're in the wrong line. You're in the return line. This is the checkout line." So I started laughing because here's the deal. Technically, Lee is the one with the disability. I was the one in the wrong line. So when you say things to me like that word disability, I have to admit more than anything I struggle with that simply because all of us have abilities. We all have things we can do. Even those of us who have limited physical mobility or limited potential cognitive output, we all have abilities. We all have things that we can do. I had amazing neighbors who were 95 and 94, and they could get around beautifully. The reality is, however, they still needed a little extra help. We're all going to need a little extra help. That doesn't make us less than. We're the same people, whether we are 27 and able to run a marathon or 97 needing a little bit of extra help. The person inside is the same. And so when we look at this conversation on accessibility, you aren't just doing it for those people. You're doing it for all of us. We're doing this for you, we're doing this for me, you're doing it for kids like my Elliot, you're doing it for your grandparents. This is for our community and the ability to make our community a better place. Fortune 500 companies do not build their companies based on what their employees cannot do. They look and they farm the gifts that our employees do have. If you're good at something, if you have a natural gift, you want to grow that. I mean, individuals who grow up in our area and want to be farmers, they don't become farmers because, oh, I really stink at making things grow. They become farmers because it's what they love. They love the smell of dirt. They love the way the tractor sounds. They love it. Nobody in their right mind would become a farmer unless you absolutely loved it. Because it's a calling, it's not simply a job. So for me, I don't understand why we concentrate on the things that we cannot do. I would prefer, and I think you see more growth when you concentrate on what people can do. So Downcountry is very unique. It's unique, one, in that it has no paid employees, it's unique, or paid staff for that matter. It's a 100% volunteer organization. This simple concept 10 years ago was simply that we were going to start what we called I Learn scholarships. And people would apply, and these participants would be selected. And then they would be eligible for any national or international conference $2,000 per year for 5 years, so a total of a $10,000 scholarship over the course of those 5 years. And they could go to multiple conferences in each year. They had to figure out how to budget their money. You don't know what you don't know. And very often we're working at max capacity thinking, well, I'm doing my best. But then you go out to a national conference and you learn one new way to do things, or you learn one new tip or trick, and you just transform the life of a child or a family. That's magic. They've been to over 100 different national and international conferences now. And then we added on what we called the iCare iPad program, which started because kids and parents were bringing iPads to their teachers saying, hey, I need this, it'll help me with my school, or it'll help grant me accessibility to curriculum. The teacher, however, has 20 other kids in her class and she's never seen this thing before. And so how is she supposed to learn how to use it when she didn't have access to it? And so that aspect of our program, we started donating, and we donated over 350 of them to tri-state area teachers and schools so that teachers could have access to that technology. Now, 10 years later, almost every school in the tri-state, is one-to-one or some format of one-to-one. But at the time Downcountry started, that wasn't a thing. We do have what's known as the iHeal program, and that is open for doctors and physicians in this area so that they can go and learn what they need to know to help individuals who learn and live life differently. The I Speak program is where we bring national and international speakers into the tri-state area. And we've brought in over 50 where they've worked one-on-one with our parents, with our schools, with our medical clinics. And now, after all this, now when you've seen the children that have grown up that are now young men and women who are passionate advocates for their friends who live and learn life differently, now when you see things like a College for Life program developing here in the tri-states, which was a pay it forward from one of our iLearns, it's a really unique and beautiful thing. For me, how do you know when you're being successful is any time that we can open a door to greater possibilities for that individual than what was expected before. Right now, it's when I know that a child is in a classroom. Right now, it's when I know that a child suddenly has a voice because someone knew how to use what's known as AAC, alternate augmentative communication. Right now, it's when I have a young woman tell me that she's always wanted to go to dental school, but she now knows she wants to get her certification so that when she comes home from dental school, she's going to open up shop here in the tri-states, and she wants to specialize and make people aware that she wants to work with individuals who learn life differently. It's knowing that we have a young lady who was 6 at the time who's already planning to be a speech-language pathologist because of her experience. It's the business owner who agrees to hire an intern with a disability or to allow job shadowing to continue. It's the teacher who allows a child to use voice to text instead of handwriting if necessary to grant access. It's anytime I get to sit down and have a conversation with someone who takes the time to listen about what is possible. And not just that individual with a disability, that individual meaning myself, meaning a community member, meaning anybody. Anytime we can open one person's eyes this much wider, then we're being successful. So if you've been listening this last 30 minutes, my hope is that you'll join Downcountry. And by joining, I mean joining in the possibility in helping further the concept that every child is a gift, every child can learn, and every child learns differently. I'm hoping that today's show will help you understand that World Down Syndrome Day is more than just a day. It's truly a celebration of individuals of all abilities. And I'm hoping that today you will join us in furthering our cause of awareness to acceptance right here in the tri-states. To learn more, please feel free to go to upatdowncountry.com. God bless and thank you. Happy World Down Syndrome Day.
The proceeding has been a special presentation from WGEM.